Welcome back to Project 613. Today we learn another 6 mitzvot on the topic of the kosher diet. The first is that it is forbidden for a Jew to cook milk and meat together, even if they are not planning to eat from it. The Torah tells us, Lo tvashel gedi b'chalev imo, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. And even though the Torah uses the words of a kid in its mother's milk, we know by the oral tradition that this is in truth a reference to any milk together with any meat that would be forbidden. The Torah only uses these specific words by way of example because this was common practice at the time. The second mitzvah that we learn today is the prohibition against eating milk and meat together. So in addition to cooking it, it is an independent violation to eat from a mixture of milk and meat together, and we know this because the Torah repeats this same exact phrase a second time, Lo tvashel gedi b'chalev imo, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk, in order to teach us this exact point, that not only is it forbidden for us to cook it, but even to eat is also forbidden. As for why the Torah uses the word cooking the second time round when it's clearly a reference to eating, the Talmud explains us many details and many laws that are inferred specifically from the particular wording that the Torah uses, and why the Torah was specific in repeating the exact same phrase a second time, even though we know for a fact that it is actually a reference to eating, not to cooking. Now, in later generations, the rabbis instituted an additional safeguard to this law, whereas even though, from a biblical perspective, only meat of an animal is forbidden to have together with milk, but meat of a chicken or other fowl would be permitted. The rabbis prohibited this as a safeguard for the Torah law because of the confusion, not because people would confuse a piece of chicken and a piece of meat, but rather because there are so many similarities when it comes to the preparation of chicken and meat from a kosher ritual perspective. They therefore thought that people would draw comparisons and say, if one is permitted, so too would another one be permitted, and so on. And therefore they said any meat, both from an animal and from chicken, would be forbidden to have together with milk. Included in this prohibition is also that it's forbidden for us to derive any benefit from a mixture of milk and meat. So selling it, for example, would also be included in this biblical prohibition. The third, fourth, and fifth mitzvah that we learn today have to do with the prohibition of Khadesh. Now, what Khadesh means is that it's forbidden for us to partake of any new grain from the fresh crop. We're not allowed to eat it until the Omer offering is brought on the holiday of Pesach, on the second day of Pesach, the 16th of the month of Nisan. What this means is that any grain that has taken root following Pesach is not allowed to be eaten until the following Pesach, after the Omer offering is brought. So any of the fresh wheat that is planted in the winter season, for example, we cannot use it, we cannot eat from it until Pesach has passed and the Omer offering has been brought. Now, there are 3 specific prohibitions included in this, and the Torah lists, number 1, bread, number 2, roasted grain, and number 3, fresh kernels, lechem, koli, caramel. They are all forbidden and are counted as independent violations. The 6th and final mitzvah that we learn today is the mitzvah of Arla. And Arla means that it is forbidden for us to partake from the fruit of a tree for the first 3 years of its life. We are not allowed to partake from its fruits. And even in the 4th year, there are limitations of how the fruits can be used. They have to be taken to Jerusalem, or they have to be transferred. We can use the money of their value in Jerusalem as well, but the actual fruits themselves we are not allowed to partake of for the first 3 years. This is known as the mitzvah of Arla. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.